Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. But before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. We're also live every Thursday at 2 p.m., so subscribe on YouTube at IN Magazine so you can join us every Thursday when we go live. Did I say Tuesday? We're live every Tuesday? We're live every Thursday. So make sure to email the podcast when you join us live every Tuesday.
Hey, you miss 1 week.
1 week and it's
everything,
gone.
All the wheels fall off.
Yeah, Anna, how are you doing this week? And also, thanks. You really held it together last week.
Held it together.
Yeah, I mean, well,
Is that a compliment?
Oh yeah, you had.
Usually you're a little off the rails.
Yeah.
No, it was, you had someone completely new, and Zell, and he's just normally a real firecracker, so it's just hard to rein all that personality in.
Keep going.
It's good. I like to lose friendships.
Yes. Oh, yep.
Yep, it was good.
Yep.
It was good. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
it was
you.
good. No, I thought Nolan did a great job. I always love working with Andy on the panel. He's always got some interesting perspectives, and I love his dry delivery. So we had a good time.
No, I thought it was really good. Once you introduced Nolan and he started with the salute, I knew that we were in for a real treat. I'm like,
sure.
oh, he's ready.
He's ready.
He's ready. Jeff, how you doing this week?
Good, yeah. I actually listened to the podcast for the first time in a while just because I don't like the sound of my own voice. It's kind of hard for me to listen to, but I thought last week the guys stepped in and did a great job.
Yeah.
Deep roster here at the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Yeah. Sorry if that was interpreted as, barely holding it together. I thought it went really well is what I meant. I struggle.
Have we concluded our investigation into Nolan's resume and what he may or may not have made up, though?
No, but I mean, it'd be nice to fire up that Indeed profile and see what kind
I think we need to do some digging.
what kind of Easter eggs he has hidden for us in there.
Yeah, he seemed to want to use that as to sort of massage something that may have been off on his.
Yeah, and very casual, almost to
Yeah.
like serial killer degree, how he just slipped that in.
Yeah.
Well, we all lie on our resumes.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, I guess I side with him on that one. A little creative license. It's been a while. When was the last time you updated your resume?
Fair.
Could you find it?
I don't know.
I feel like I would have to fire up some old machine sitting in my e-waste pile of the basement.
Put in like that. What was it?
In like a floppy disk.
Yeah.
Just like, what is it? Yeah, 98 resume. There we go. All right. Well, before we jump into our first story this week, we have a message from our new sponsor, QAD Red Zone. This week's episode is brought to you by QAD Red Zone. A big part of maintaining a functional and efficient manufacturing environment is to understand what it takes to make a team work. And for a business like Nuco, who has been proudly making high-quality adhesives in North America since 1988, empowering and motivating its employees is a critical objective. This is why Nuco set out to find solutions to bring technology to its workforce in order to aid the team in goals around productivity and compliance, meanwhile boosting morale. In this exclusive webinar, we have a great group of leaders discussing how this was able to come together, both from Nuco and also from QAD Red Zone, the tech partner whose solutions help Nuco achieve the benefits we plan, or Anna discusses. So make sure to register so you can watch that today. Anna, you were able to steer that webinar. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, QAD Red Zone's got a really interesting tech line. They kind of try to create a work environment that appeals to a younger workforce. They provide tools that allow workers to kind of it's almost like gamification, but to track their progress and to get kudos, and everything is like very visible, so they know. You know how people say like they quit a job because they didn't know if they're doing a good job.
They want to know where they stand.
Yeah. And this kind of solves that problem. So it's kind of a fun conversation to have when you get to talk to the people who are really using those tools in their application. And I would recommend the webinar to anybody who is interested in trying to lean into maybe harnessing a new workforce and tools that you can use to make that happen.
So link in the chat right now to download it. And there's also a link in the body copy so you can download it to watch it on demand. And it's okay. You know, the attaboy's good when you can give them here and there. But when you need that like daily attaboy, that's when I'm like, oh, that's an undertaking. Our first story this week. Lego just tested a life-size McLaren supercar. In July, British supercar maker McLaren Automotive and Lego Group collaborated on a Lego Technic McLaren P1, a 1/8 scale, 3,893-piece Lego set that paid homage to, quote, the best driver's car in the world on both road and track. It is cool. Last week, the Lego Group and McLaren debuted a one-of-a-kind, fully drivable McLaren P1 made from 342,817 Lego Technic elements. It was much cooler. The Lego Technic engine consists of 8 motor packs, each with 96 Lego power function motors, which means the car features a total of 768 Lego motors. The 8 motor packs actually mimic the V8 on the original McLaren P1. McLaren Formula One driver Lando Norris recently tested the prototype at the Silverstone Circuits, an iconic racetrack in the UK that spans some 3.66 miles. The car weighs about 2,689 pounds and has fully functional steering. It took 23 specialists from Lego and McLaren who spent more than 8,344 hours of development and construction on the project. The team used 393 different types of Lego Technic elements, including 11 that were molded specifically for this project. And one thing about this story that I kind of found it hard to believe was that Lego has never had a scale build that could drive around corners until now. And I mean, I understand, yeah, this is a 400,000 piece supercar made out of Legos. But I was like, what do you mean you've never made a Lego big build that could drive? It surprised me.
You're like, that sounds easy. I don't know why
yeah,
you would have not done that yet.
Yeah, it's, you know, I mean, but one thing that's kind of cool about Legos is that's the one thing with your imagination is anytime you make something small, you know, based on how it's all sort of standard shapes and sizes that you can, it's really easy to envision these structures as life-size cars, for example. Mm-hmm. And I just thought this was a really cool project that draw a lot of eyes to the STEM side of the business that, you know, otherwise might not be that interested.
Yeah, definitely. That, to me, that was the biggest takeaway because it's as a vehicle, there's a lot of like, oh, that's cool. What else do you say? Beyond that, unless you're a super, you know, gearhead, I guess. But to me, it was looking at the collaboration and the kind of crossover. You know, you've got your Lego pitch, which includes, as you said, the STEM angle and kind of getting kids into the idea of working with their hands and building and what those skills would mean to so many different industries. But then you also combine that with the really like sexy industry of automotive and even better, the racing industry.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think these two really make good bedfellows because they can leverage each other. So McLaren, of course, is just embedded with Formula One. Formula One has built its fandom for several consecutive years over the past decade in the U.S., but then in the last year or so, some observers have started to ring the alarm bell and say maybe interest in this sport has started to plateau.
Oh.
The New York Times said that attendance declined between 2022 and 2023. CNBC said that keeping new audiences engaged without alienating F1 traditionalists will be one of the sport's biggest challenges over the next decade. And when I read that, I thought, wow, what better way to engage and sort of nurture fandom in a younger audience than to pair up with Lego?
Yeah.
You know, I think that Lego is a universally loved brand. It's sort of steeped in nostalgia. You can hit everybody on the spectrum with it. It addresses the need also to hit that younger audience without really turning this into something it's not in order to appeal to a younger crowd. You know, they talked about like F1 has to be careful not to use influencers because it, you know, the legacy racing fans don't like that. And anyway, So I think it's a great tie-up anyway. And from Lego's perspective, you see these types of combinations regularly where they leverage whatever's going on in pop culture. You've seen them, with like Harry Potter stuff and Star Wars, and they use that to kind of cross-promote and reach a niche that they maybe otherwise wouldn't. I will tell you, my daughter never mentioned Legos to me until Lego made an Encanto house set.
Oh, okay.
But
that one's intense.
Yeah, for sure. But to me, that's like the genius of these types of partnerships is, knowing how to go after new markets while maintaining your brand and your identity. I think it's working for both parties here. So that's, to me, like the marketing side of it and the partnership side was really an interesting element.
So F1 doesn't want to use influencers. Did I hear that right?
So I think they do, but they're sort of straddling the line here and trying to make sure that they don't alienate their existing fan base by trying to go, I think this is a growing pain for any brand, right? Yeah. Trying to make sure that you don't alienate your existing fan base by turning directions and going towards this younger crowd and what they want. So they're sort of, like the whole article was talking about how they need to leverage like the Netflix generation, but not too much.
Yeah.
But anyway, Lego is this sort of universally loved by all. So
yeah, just Netflix kind of chill. So that's the other thing that you mentioned about nostalgia with Lego is, can you think of another brand that has so perfectly transcended multiple generations? They still can pull on that nostalgia, but they're also still constantly getting new fans that aren't just in it for the nostalgia. There are so many toys that are currently available that, we'll buy for our kids because we remember playing with it. And then the kids look at it and they're like, it's a dog on a string. Oh. I don't know. Do you have my mic now? Yep. Okay. Well, let me know if you lose my mic then. Okay. Apologies to anyone that may or may not have heard me up to this point because I'm apparently having mic problems. So mic technique day one.
Accident.
Yeah, I accidentally dropped the mic. But when they remake the telephone that on the string and the eyes roll back and forth and it makes noise and your kids play with it for 2 hot seconds and then it sits in the closet forever. I think that Lego is one of the toys that has really transcended generations. Jeff, when you saw this thing, wasn't there a part of you that's just like, what does it feel like to drive that?
Honestly, it was the exact opposite.
Oh, really?
When I first saw this, it's kind of like, why? Okay. Especially when I saw all the hours that went into this from an engineering perspective.
It's a lot of resources.
It was like, man, for a Lego race car, I wasn't quite going with it, especially because when you look at a McLaren, you're not exactly looking at a vehicle that you're going to see on the street every day. What do they sell like 5,000 of these a year or something like that?
I'd be surprised.
So it's a different scale, but then once you start getting into it and you start looking at it a little bit more, I think more than Formula One, and just kind of bouncing off what Anna was saying there, F1 needs to be super protected because you have to remember this is a sport with 4 teams, 5 teams. You've got a very limited universe in terms of people who are involved in that, so you don't want to alienate any suppliers, anybody, because there's only some people you can draw from. It's a very expensive racing series. But I think more for Legos. And like you were saying, Legos does have that legacy impact, and that's because of how they have constantly evolved their product. It's amazing. When I started looking at a thing that got me really interested here were these functional motors, these power function motors. And what they've done now, Lego kits aren't just what we had with the bucket of blocks anymore. Yeah. They're really intricate builds. Ben Munson, somebody who fills in here, does some really crazy builds, really awesome, tens of thousands of pieces, types of stuff. It's an art as much as it is a toy. It's really incredible how that's evolved. And then when you look at these motors that range from like 4.5 to 12 volt motors that you can plug in and make your designs move and just take it to the next level, it is very exciting. And it bleeds into all these things that we talk about in terms of getting, the younger generations more involved in engineering. If my Legos came with a motor and LED lights, man, that just takes it to another level. And it goes beyond even the things that we could imagine before, and just exponentially builds on everything that you want with your kids playing with Legos.
Yeah.
So I think that was once I got into it, that was the bigger takeaway in terms of what Lego is really getting out of this type of partnership and where they can build on it. And now it does, play into all the STEM stuff that we talk about, and hopefully sort of also breaking down some of those walls when we talk about people not wanting to get into the industrial sector. Here's a prime example of some of the cool stuff that comes from it.
Well, and I think I got to watch it happen in real time with my oldest son because, I worked on the story while I was out. Anna, you shot this video, and I got to watch it for the first time with Desmond. And I was just like, look at this car. And he's like, yeah, yellow car. And I'm like, no, wait till you see this car. And then when they show the close-up and you see that, the entire exterior is made out of Legos.
Yeah.
And he's just blowing his mind like, no. And he, we have a tote full of Legos downstairs, and it was immediately downstairs to start working on, something out of his imagination on Legos. I'm like, this is what it's for. It is working. And I thought it was incredible. And I also think it's just cool. I would be really interested to drive it because Lando Norris, the driver, he seemed genuinely surprised as to how well it handled, and I mean, it's something different to go from racing the highest performance, feats of engineering in the world to, a proof of concept prototype made out of Legos. That's got to be a bit of a difference.
Sure. Yeah.
Like how he was joking about the fake mirrors, because that was one thing that kind of got him, is the mirrors on the side kind of were a little floppy, had a little dog ear action going on. He's like, that was unsettling.
You see, he got up to 40 miles an hour.
That's crazy.
That is crazy.
But we had another story that I just wanted to mention briefly about getting kids interested in STEM and the trades, but also, in my opinion, teachers too. So Northern Tool and Equipment and Monster Jam, which personal favorite, recently announced, or today, this week announced, a 3-year partnership that includes hands-on experience that's going to inspire Texas high school students to pursue careers in the skilled trades. This program is called Tools for the Trades Monster Jam Mini Build, and students at Bryan High School's Career and Technical Education program are going to start making a Monster Jam Mini Build that uses Northern Tool and Equipment's North Star EFI engine, essential tools from DeWalt, Ingersoll Rand, and Milwaukee. These students in Texas are going to build a mini monster truck. And I think that's just so cool for the kids and getting them interested. But a lot of these schools are having trouble holding on to these programs, staffing these programs. And I don't know, if I'm somebody that could potentially fill this role and I'm like, wait a second, I got to watch kids, but we get to make a monster truck. That's something that might help fill those roles as well. I don't know. I think that's an additional cool factor that, when you normally think you're going to be a shop teacher, just like, whoa, you're not just working on mufflers here. You're going to build a mini gravedigger. And that's awesome. All right, our next most popular story this week. Before we get into that, Doug Hatch is joining us live. It's good to hear from you, Doug. He says, I was lucky to have a block with an axle and wheels in my Lego set.
Yeah.
I mean, it's come a long way. Hey, but Doug, there's also no shame in adults playing with Legos now. That's part of the fun. Like, that is my aunt's retirement. Like, she has an entire Lego room full of these sets. Some people craft, some people do antique tractors. She does Lego sets.
Great.
All right. Well, Doug, buy an updated one. Our next most popular story. The 163-year-old shipmaker that built the Titanic is broke. Harland & Wolff has been making ships since 1861, but the company's claim to fame, or infamy, is the RMS Titanic, which sank in 1912. The 163-year-old British shipmaker has taken on too much water. Now the company says it's insolvent after failing to find enough funding to stay afloat. The Belfast company recently requested $264 million in help from the UK Export Finance, but that was rejected. The company has 4 shipyards, and its current operations include a plan to build 3 FSS vessels, among others. The FSS project is important because the company is on pace to have more than 6 million hours invested in these vessels. but preparations for the FSS project have been on a standstill since July, and now Harland and Wolff may have to cut from non-core and other areas. The company said further reductions might be necessary depending on the outcome of some of these strategic objectives. As CNN points out, this isn't the first time that the company has faced bankruptcy. The company was preparing to restructure in 2019 before a UK energy company, Infrastrata, agreed to buy its assets for about $8 million. The revived company last year delivered the first ship from its Belfast shipyard in more than 2 decades. Anna, I was surprised, that this company was able to, or actually, Jeff, I'll go to you first. I was surprised that this company was able to stick around for so long, survive a catastrophic incident like the Titanic, but also how, we've recently covered a lot of these companies that really struggled coming out of the pandemic. It seems like this is another one, but this is an example of where they went to the government and said, hey, we need $264 million in guaranteed loans, otherwise we're going away. And they basically said, hey, that's too risky for taxpayers. Sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think one of the things that we always talk about with some of these companies is diversifying your product line and getting into different areas, not to put all your eggs in one basket type of thing. But I think that may have actually worked against this company here, because we look at the fleet solid support ships. These aren't necessarily mission critical type of vessels. They're basically taking supplies out to the bigger boats. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to make a cut, that might be a place you start. Yeah. When you look at a lot of the other things that they sort of quote unquote specialize in, you're looking at ferries, you're looking at repairs, things like that aren't exactly at the top maybe of everybody's budget list or is as essential. Yeah. And then they also get into like offshore energy platforms and things like that. It feels like they were almost too scattered. Maybe if they could have put their resources behind one or two of those businesses, maybe they could have shut down one of these 4 shipyards. I mean, the one hasn't produced a new ship in how long? Yeah. They were just here
2 decades,
They were just here 5 years ago as well. It just feels like with all the restructuring and even the cash infusion that they got the last time they declared bankruptcy from some partners, they just never had a clear vision of what this company was going to be. You throw in the fact that there is, Asia basically dominates shipbuilding because the costs are so much lower. So it makes it very difficult to compete no matter where you're located or what your legacy is. I think the writing was sort of on the wall for these folks for a while. And while you could appreciate the history and legacy of the company, if you don't do things to stay competitive, unfortunately, this is a reality of it.
It is wild how, some people talk about it in generalities, how easy it is, right? Like, no, you're too niche, you got to diversify. You're too diversified, you got to slim down a little bit. I think it is a reminder of how difficult it is to, sort of manage these waters.
Walk that line.
Yeah. Anna, what were your thoughts on the potential fate of this company? Were you surprised that they went to the government and said, hey, we need a loan of more than $250 million, and the government said that's just too risky for our taxpayers?
We've covered a few insolvent shipbuilders in our time on this podcast. And the last one we talked about was a company where the fallout was going to be 3,000 direct jobs and more in, adjacent industries. That was in Germany, and Germany did bail that company out. Mm-hmm. In this case, when Infrastrata bought this company out of bankruptcy in 2019, they said that it was responsible for 70 jobs.
Okay.
That's a pretty big difference. I know that it's a hard calculation to make. You're talking about people's livelihoods and such, but if the business model is precarious to begin with, and then you're not talking about, an industry leader that's like anchoring a town or something. You're talking 70 jobs like that. Sometimes that's a tough decision that just has to be made, right?
Yeah.
I tend to agree with Jeff on this, that it seems like their business model was a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, fragmented maybe. Yeah. They did have a lot going on. I know that, we talked about the cruise industry being kind of on the upswing. They were doing maintenance and repair work on those types of ships. They talked about how they had some of the most extensive repair facilities in Western Europe. They talked about their docks in Belfast. They had extensive permanent craneage, 2 gantry cranes, a ton of deep water. So I think they did have it sounds like a healthy repair business that was tying up a lot of their efforts over the last couple of decades. Getting back into shipbuilding seemed like a more recent shift. But the other thing that I thought was kind of interesting was when you look at the Infrastrada acquisition.
Yeah.
That was an energy buy. You mentioned they were an energy company. So I looked back to see what their reasoning was when they bought the company. And they said that their plan was to use Harlan and Wolff to bring in-house a large part of the engineering and fabrication requirements for their Island McGee gas storage project and proposed floating storage and regasification project. So that was 2019. In 2020, if you recall, the natural gas industry took an incredible nosedive. So I don't think that was a great way to start for that partnership. I don't know what kind of a factor that was in the overall success or failure of this venture here, but it wasn't a good place to begin.
I was just going to say, it wasn't really a partnership. They basically bought a bunch of assets to try to get some infusion and cash in there to help buoy some of these other sort of disjointed or fragmented industries that they were operating in, and it never played out. I don't know if you guys saw too, they did officially enter into bankruptcy. Or
I did see that.
Administration, yes, UK bankruptcy. No, that was I was trying to look at the difference between that, where they had a cash infusion, but $8 million must have been next to nothing for the company, especially when they're
it was.
You know, when they're talking about $264 million. And so was it 70 jobs just at one of those shipyards? Because the number I saw said they had 1,100 jobs across, but that was down from, at one point, they had 40,000 employees.
Yeah, that I don't know. All I know is that in the press release that put out by Infrastrada about the acquisition, they said they were saving 70 jobs.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, and I guess because they were buying specific assets, maybe those were the workers that specifically worked on those specific tasks at those shipyards. I don't know. But, I mean, I hate to use the term circling the drain, but this one just, in a follow-up article, Executive Director Russell Downs, who actually replaced CEO John Wood, who took a voluntary and immediate leave of absence once everything fell through with the government. He needed a minute. This is a big loss. But Russell Downs was talking to shareholders, and a lot of the quotes just sounded dejected. He basically said, "I'm sorry." And his quote was, "Business has been bad at times. We were late on payments to our landlord as well as key suppliers, and that has impaired trust and confidence. That loan was an effort to restore that trust." And that just, to me, that sounds like the second to last message to everybody. Just like, hey, it's been fun, huh? We did the Titanic. You know, we're always going to be in the books for that one. But I don't know. It sounds like there might be a grim fate standing in front of this company. John, who is watching us live, and it's always good to hear from you, John, says that his daughter worked for Monster Jam, and it's a wild industry.
Whoa. And
I'm insanely jealous, John. And if you still have a good connect at Monster Jam, you need to help a podcaster out. All right, we could use at least 3 here. I mean, they're coming to Milwaukee in January, I believe. I'm not sure. It's not like I was looking at tickets yesterday. But I mean, pit pass here, they know. All right. Well, our next most popular story. It took 50,000 gallons of water to put out the Tesla semi-fire in California. Last week, the National Transportation Safety Board said California firefighters had to douse a flaming battery in a Tesla semi with about 50,000 gallons of water. According to the AP, they also used an aircraft to drop fire retardant on and around the electric truck in the surrounding area. During the fire, the battery reached 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about 540 degrees C, and the crash happened around 3 a.m. on Monday, August 19th, after the truck left the road while going around a curve and hit a tree. It went down a slope, stopped against several trees. The driver, a Tesla employee, was taking the semi from Livermore, California to a Tesla facility in Sparks, Nevada, and at least he wasn't hurt. But the lithium-ion battery ignited after the crash. The freeway was closed for some 15 hours. Emergency personnel had to wait until the truck was cool enough to move it, And then it was then moved to an open air facility and monitored for 24 hours to make sure the battery didn't reignite. The accident is still under investigation. After all is said and done, the NTSB is going to issue its regular safety recommendations to prevent similar incidents. Anna, is it possible that the safety recommendations is that these trucks aren't safe to hit the road yet?
No, I think I don't agree with that statement, and I don't think that's what they will say.
Okay.
I know. I think it bears mentioning that the risk of a vehicle fire in an electric vehicle is quite a bit lower than that in a hybrid vehicle and also an ICE vehicle. That doesn't mean that it's nothing, and it doesn't mean that this problem of thermal runaway, which is a separate issue, doesn't need to be addressed. I just think the timing of the story is interesting because Wired just put out a really great report on some of the methods that automakers are undertaking to make EV battery fires more manageable. And outside of firefighter training, which is obviously a huge part of this, there was a lot that they had in there about ways in which auto companies and their partners that they're working with on battery tech are trying to figure out this Rubik's Cube to make sure that it's it's a better solution here. But one of the things that they talked about is that manufacturers are placing more emphasis on quality and testing to eliminate flaws and to keep fires from happening in the first place. That's one thing. But secondly, all these R&D efforts that we report on all the time, these partnerships around batteries, things like that, they are for something. And automakers are already really hard at work on specific battery chemistries that are harder to ignite, specifically LFP batteries, which degrade slower. They don't enter thermal runaway as quickly, yet they have to reach a much higher temperature than lithium-ion batteries. Those are already on the market. They're in newer Teslas, Fords, and Rivians. And then I think the holy grail, we've talked about these before on the podcast, are solid-state batteries. Those are reportedly have been far improved in development over the past 5 years. They're performing great in tests as far as we are being told, but they're not on the market really yet. It sounds like barriers are going to be the classic ones you get in automotive: supply chain maturity for this, materials, manufacturability, cost. So when they're market ready, solid state batteries will do a lot to solve this problem. In the meantime, training has to be a part of this. It stands to reason that a type of crash like this would make a gasoline-powered truck explode. But what they need to figure out then is, like, what is the best way to put these out that they don't reignite, they don't shut down the highway for 15 hours or whatever, all the stuff that's going along with this. And unfortunately, I think when people see this, they think EVs are not safe. But if you look at the data, they really are. Yeah, but
no, that's why you shut it down right away. You're like, no, they're fine. They're safe. When I asked the question, you're like, I do not agree with that statement.
You said, is the statement going to be that these are not?
No, I know. Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's just,
Remember, David plays both sides of everything?
David's advocate?
Yeah. I'm David's advocating the David's advocacy. Well, and to your points, manufacturers are working on new emergency response specific guidelines because that's what the NTSB asked for last time there was an accident. So that's why, we've talked about it many times before when these NTSB reports come out, like the last few pages are all very succinct and spelled out what you need to do going forward to make sure that these types of incidents don't happen. And if they do happen, they're, mitigated and put out a little bit faster. I can't imagine trying to fight this fire, and at some point you're like, I don't know, can we get a plane to drop some fire retardant on?
I know, right?
And just like how far? I don't know, kind of everywhere. It's burning real hot right now.
Yeah, how much water do we have? 50,000 gallons? Okay, we'll use all of it.
Yeah, use all of it. Well, and I mean, we have joked about it on previous podcasts before, but the shovel, just dig a hole and bury it. And it's, when it's a semi, you're going to need a big shovel.
Yeah.
But Jeff, we're going to see more of these battery-powered trucks on the road very soon. One thing that we've kind of talked about is whether or not these will be partially or fully automated at some point. And I thought that was one important thing to pull from this report is that Tesla's partially automated driving system was not engaged at the time of the crash. It was actually disabled, so it couldn't be engaged. This was just a normal run-of-the-mill accident. So that way it doesn't kind of fuel the autopilot fire with this one at least.
Well, I wouldn't call it a run-of-the-mill accident.
Yeah.
But it's one that the narrative could have been, I don't want to say controlled, but could have been expanded a little bit more. Just this week, at a conference, Dan Priestley, who's one of the senior engineering managers at Tesla Semi, gave a presentation where he talked about how they've done 7.5 million miles of testing with this Semi. Pretty sure this is the first fire, at least at this level, that we have heard about. That needs to be part of the narrative.
Yeah.
Because what this is leading to then down the road, people connect the dots pretty quickly when they don't want to do something. And right now, they don't want to buy electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So they can connect to this and say, I don't want to drive one of those things. It's going to start on fire. Did you see the picture of the Semi?
I mean
there
there's
was nothing but the basically the frame left.
Yeah.
It's pretty catastrophic looking.
Yeah.
So if you want to continue to, sorry, your wife will love this pun, feed the fire of opposition against EVs, this stuff is going to help with that.
Yeah.
What we need, and whether he likes it or not, Elon Musk is sort of the head of this industry, this consortium, this group, whatever you want to call it, because there isn't one for electric vehicles.
Yeah.
They need to get out in front of this stuff and explain the dynamic. This was a prototype. We're still testing. This was a test run from one Tesla facility to another. It wasn't on autonomous. There was one guy who made it out. Bad fire, agreed, but we've also run 7.5 million miles without incident.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
The other thing that this reinforces from an infrastructure perspective is if we're going to go down this road with EVs, which we are. That's where we're going. Not only do we need to work at the grid, we also need to look at resources from a safety perspective, like having a lot of water on hand, because while we're going to get better at controlling the heat within these vehicles, it's still a bigger issue. And thankfully, this did happen in an area of the world where they're used to handling huge, massive fires where they could bring in air support and drop something on it.
Yeah, that is looking at the bright side. Hey, at least the fire happened.
Look, if that happens in Wisconsin, what happens here? I mean, fields are burning for a day.
Maybe, hopefully it's close to an airport.
You see my point?
Yeah.
But that's part of the whole thing too, because obviously you reach out to Tesla, you get crickets.
Yeah.
Well, there needs to be more explanation going on with all of these safety incidents as it relates to EV and putting it in perspective. It's not a new Wild West technology. It's something where when something happens, we blow it up and it does get more attention, rightfully so. But there also needs to be some more additional information provided along with that message.
Doug says this is just Tesla sensationalism. And I would say, nah. I mean, all you need to do is look at a photo of that crash and realize, hey, this was a pretty catastrophic accident. And, you know, more people are drawn to it because of the Tesla relationship. But, Jeff, you know, because you brought him up. You brought up Elon Musk and the head of Tesla. And I think we could all agree that I'm the biggest Elon Musk homer on this panel. Like probably far and away in terms of, you know, supporting the person. But let's just say I have run into some doubts lately, particularly with his fascination in becoming the carnival barker on the town hall of the world. In the last 24 hours, how many times would you think he's tweeted?
Too many.
Well, I guess 28. I don't know if you know that's too many, but that is just, and it's over the last
28 times.
28 times he's posted and reposted.
Deleted.
Well, they're still there, but I mean, you know, it's all political propaganda and you know all kinds of odd stuff. And it's just when you're putting that much time into the social media platform, I get it if that's the new baby, I get it. But man, you could before when you were kind of working behind the scenes with Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink. And you were quieter, you could make the argument that you had enough time because, you know, you just never slept and you worked all the time that you could have your hands controlling these three major industries. But man, when you see that kind of behavior online, I don't know, for me, I become much more skeptical as to how much control he really has at those companies and, you know, how reliable he can be as a leader.
Yeah, my conspiracy theory is he's trying to kill X. Like all the advertisers have basically fled the ship. He's just basically trying to
it's just going to become like the world's biggest write-off.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I guess what is the world's biggest write-off? That's got to be close. What do you buy it for? Like 44 billion?
Something
okay.
ridiculous like that.
I don't know. I don't use the platform nearly as much as I used to, but I was just, when I was doing this story, I was thinking about how that was going to come up, Anna, right? Him as the leader. And I'm just like, you know what? Because anytime you open your feed, the algorithm puts him right at the top of it. And I'm just like, how many times just in the last 24 hours has he just done nothing but be on this platform? And that's a lot. That is a lot.
I mean, the person aside, like I've always contended that even two companies being run by the same individual in an executive role is too much. Two, like SpaceX and Tesla, before this whole thing with X, like that was too much. I think it does a disservice to your, employees, shareholders, the market, everybody. He would argue that he has full focus on all of these things, but they're really big companies. I mean,
yeah.
How could you be doing them, Well,
and to the point I was trying to make is you could make that argument when you're quietly operating behind the scenes, popping up once in a while with some sort of meme or joke. But when you can see what you've been doing actively over the last 18 to 24 hours, that doesn't look like focus on SpaceX to me. That looks like a heavy stake in the next election. John, who's also watching us live, which I already said, so I apologize for being redundant. He says, we need a new battery science. The technology is going to be really dangerous in a pileup. That could be bad.
A lot of it happening now and a lot of it coming.
Yes.
John.
All right. Our next most popular story. This one kind of surprised me that it made the top 5, and so I was excited about it because it was, just kind of feel good. Screw thread solves a 173-year-old mystery. When London's Crystal Palace was built in 1851, it was the largest building in the world. Mystery surrounded how the structure was completed in just 190 days. A new study from Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge, England, discovered that the Crystal Palace was the first building known to use a standard screw thread. The Crystal Palace is the earliest known building to use Whitworth screw threads, later known as British Standard Whitworth, or BSW, the first national screw thread standard in the world. More than 1,837 feet long, the palace had a massive glass roof consisting of 60,000 glass panels, and it was supported by 3,300 cast iron columns. The Crystal Palace was a temporary structure constructed initially in Hyde Park, which is in the middle of London. It was dismantled and rebuilt in South London in 1854, and it stood there until it burned down in 1936. Researchers discovered Whitworth screw threads in a column bolt in the building's remains, as well as a nearby water tower that was designed to power the fountains for the Crystal Palace. Until Whitworth invented the threads, no two screws and bolts or nuts and bolts were alike. Standard measurements didn't exist, which made construction very time-consuming, and lost or broken screws and bolts were nearly impossible to replace. The Crystal Palace, for example, had 30,000 nuts and bolts. That seems low?
Big structure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, out of the photos of this, the context, and the one thing I couldn't get my mind over was, what do you mean they didn't use the same one? Just like every time they're like, no, just thread it. It'll be fine. It made no sense to me. Professor John Gardner, who led this study, said the innovation helped change the world. At the time, progress was happening so fast, though, that breakthroughs like this slipped through the cracks. And Anna, 173 years later, they're just, that's how they did it. Because somebody found a couple of nuts and bolts in the, historical, in a museum, essentially, cracked them open, probably using the most croil that has ever been used before. And, finally figured out that it was the first time someone used a standard screw.
Yeah. In looking at photos of this structure, it's absolutely incredible and difficult to imagine how it could have been built so quickly, threaded fasteners or no.
Right.
But really, there was a time when architecture was a way for countries to kind of compete over what they could do. These were not just buildings, but they were representative of a region's industrial prowess or their cultural progress. So, when you say that this slipped through the cracks, I don't know if I agree. I mean, this is just speculation, of course, but, this was likely a massive achievement when it took place. And you can't help but wonder, I think, that they maybe kept this discovery a secret by design in order to sort of maintain that advantage.
Okay.
And then maybe later is when it slipped through the cracks. But at the time, potentially they're like, look what we can do. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
But, the other thing that I noticed that stood out to me in this story was just that, fasteners are such a big part of our industry. We reach fastener distributors, manufacturers. They tend to be viewed as boring but necessary components, nuts and bolts. But things like this, I think, really make you wonder what kind of stories the sellers of these products could tell.
Yeah.
If they kind of looked back maybe at their customer base and saw like where they were used and how they were used. And, it's so much of it is going to be lost in the fabric of time, but that was two metaphors mixed together. But, sorry. Lost in the, I don't know. Undiscoverable at this point. But the fact that this kind of, sprung up was a pretty cool thing.
I do like the idea of, this is an entire exhibition full of inventions, innovations, and other things. And because the researchers actually said that Whitworth received the Council Medal for some of the other things that he had displayed in the Crystal Palace. But his role in the building's construction took, almost 2 centuries from being recognized. Mm-hmm. It would be interesting to know, kind of looking back in time, if him and his family knew all along. And I'm actually kind of curious as to what he received a medal for. And then just in the overall historical context, just like, no, but like nuts and bolts. That was their bread and butter. That was kind of a really big deal. B Park, who is watching us live, good to hear from you if you're new, B Park. He says, or this person says, Whitworth threads, 36 to the inch, are still used in microscope objective lens mounts. Huh. So, hey, still making an impact. But I thought this was a pretty cool story, Jeff. And particularly when it comes to, so we've worked with Croyle before in the past. And looking for applications where things are so frozen, it's crazy to me how the oil gets in and can break those threads loose. And I actually reached out to the professor just to ask, could you give me any more information about how long you had to soak these bolts for, how much you had to heat them to, how much you had to hammer them just to get them free. And they just directed me to the paper. You can read the paper, you can look at it. I'm like, come on, I just want more details. Like, talk about how difficult it was to crack these things. But ever since I told my brother that, who works into a shop, he's like, I use Croyle every day. He's just, it's a way of life. So another kind of fun fact from this is that to make sure it was legit, the researchers made new bolts to the British standard Whitworth specs. And man, they just fit that old bolt like a glove. It was really cool. Alex 8828, who's also watching us live, says, flash forward to World War II, the Brits still hadn't mastered standardization, and the U.S. had to build all the Rolls-Royce Merlin engines for the Brits. Uh-huh. That is a wild piece of historical.
Yeah.
That's a great historical nugget, Alex. Thank you very much. All right. Well, let's.
You want me to talk about this story at all?
I do want to talk to you about this story. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
No, that's fine.
I'm sorry. I got too excited.
It's not important.
I got too excited, Jeff.
I'm fine.
I got too excited. I apologize. What were your thoughts? Let's just move on. No, looking at this structure, you said it doesn't seem like that many. I apologize. I'm never going to lose this down. Just like, hey, remember that time you flew by me in the 4th story? Well, you said 30,000 doesn't seem like that much. Are they selling it short?
I don't know. Just looking at the structure, it looked like, I don't know. But what I thought was interesting, if you want to go down a real interesting rabbit hole, is looking at this sounds weird, but like the history of the screw. Yeah. It was actually first used by the Romans. But once they were toppled by all those hordes that came in, that like technology was kind of lost for like 1,000 years before we saw the screw again. And what was also interesting when they talked about how quickly this went up, one of the reasons nuts and bolts and screws weren't used during construction is because they took longer and they cost more as opposed to nails. So the fact that nails weren't used here, but it still went up that fast, I thought was also kind of interesting.
That is really interesting, and I'm glad we got that. I apologize.
Thanks for your perspectives, Jeff.
Yeah.
I have another story, but it's not important.
No,
I know David wants to get on to something else. So we can just go there.
They are valuable.
Nah.
No, so you said that the Romans used the screw, but then it was
not important. Not a big deal.
What's the other nugget, Jeff?
We'll save it for next time.
I'm just gonna.
There's not going to be a next time.
There's not going to be a next time for the next long lost screw story.
Yep, we'll save it for then.
Is it really a story? Or are you just doing this because you know it'll lead at me?
A little both.
Yes.
What is it?
No, it reminded me, if you ever heard the story about the Phillips screwdriver and the Phillips screw.
Yeah.
That whole story. Basically, the guy who invented that saw all the issues. This is back in the 1930s when that was invented. He saw all the issues that was going on with the normal flathead screw, and he developed the Phillips. Patented it, all this stuff. Couldn't sell it to anybody.
Really?
Traveled around the entire U.S. Nobody was interested. They didn't know how to make it. All that kind of stuff. Took him like 2.5 years. Meets a guy in a bar named John Phillips.
Oh.
They start talking. He shows the guy the patent. The guy's like, you know what? I got a couple bucks here. I'll just buy it from you. And he sold it to him. Basically a napkin type of deal.
Yeah.
This guy was a born salesman. He went to GM. He went to Ford. He went to all the automakers and a bunch of other people. Approximately $65 million later. Yeah.
That's
the guy
lower.
who invented the Phillips screw was not named Phillips.
What did
the guy who sold it was.
What was his name?
The guy who invented it. I think it was John Williams or something along those lines.
That's actually way lower than I thought it would be.
He was a machinist who had this idea, and
poor guy.
he couldn't sell it. Kind of a McDonald's deal.
But I mean, we hear about that all the time, right? Engineers are not marketers. I cannot believe that the flathead screw has persisted over the years. Anytime you try driving that thing, and if it's not the perfect fit, it always just keeps popping out. It's like, how have we not just put this one to bed? Just put it to bed. And no, I thought the $65 million mark, I figured that.
Well, in 1930s dollars, that's a little bit. That's a lot of screws.
Part of the Phillips empire. All right, our most popular story, for which we will get all perspectives from every member of the panel before we move on to it, in case you missed it. The fastest and slowest selling vehicles in America. CarEdge recently crunched the numbers, measuring the number of days it would take to sell out all the available inventory of a vehicle based on daily sales rates. The effort looks at which vehicles are selling the fastest and the slowest, and the results were interesting. The Toyota Highlander, RAV4, and Camry are all on the top of the heap. According to CarEdge, these three models have a market supply of 1 month or less, noting that the second fastest seller, the RAV, has been purchased more than 57,000 times over the last 45 days. On the other side of the spectrum is Stellantis, maker of the two slowest selling models, the Dodge Hornet and the Grand Wagoneer. Maybe it's because it's so incredibly expensive. At current sales rates, it would take more than 400 days to clear out all of the inventory of these two vehicles, with just 233 Grand Wagoneers having been sold over the last 45 days. Clearing stock is a priority for Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares, who acknowledged in July that excess inventory was one of the company's biggest critical issues. Inventory volume is an influential factor in the buyer's ability to negotiate, a problem that may impact dealers significantly if they find themselves sitting on months and months worth of vehicles where they might not be able to demand sticker price. Anna, I know that you put this story together, and I wasn't really surprised that Toyota was the top three, but I was surprised that the Grand Wagoneer was one of the slowest selling, because having a group of friends that has an interest in Jeep, it seems like so many people want a Wagoneer, and they just make it so difficult for you to actually get one because it's so expensive. It was just not a surprise.
Like an anecdotal evidence, David.
I mean, yeah.
I don't know why that's not working out very well for Stellantis. I did find this to be interesting, of course, but CarEdge runs this data pretty regularly, but to highlight it now, considering the implications around Stellantis and some of the problems that they've been encountering, I thought it was sort of apropos. Carlos Tavares, as you mentioned, has said that excess inventory is an issue that needs solving, to be sure. But there's also been some talk lately about Tavares actually doing some brand damage to Stellantis with this. So earlier this month, leaders of Stellantis U.S. dealer network basically published an open letter to Carlos Tavares. They criticized him for what they said was the, quote, rapid degradation of the automaker's brands. And they urged him to spend more money to clear old inventory off their lots. This was on the 10th of September. The retailers accused Tavares of short-term decision-making that boosted profits last year and padded the CEO's compensation. The moves ended up shrinking the company's market share and hurting the Jeep, Ram, Dodge, and Chrysler brands. This is according to the letter. And the National Dealer Council said that basically Stellantis, what they've been doing to clear inventory, which includes price cuts and other incentives, they're saying that's been insufficient because the company is trying so hard to preserve its profit margins. Now, they say that they have been warning this Stellantis leadership of this for 2 years, and basically that Stellantis was on this collision course towards disaster. The disaster is now, they're saying. Stellantis says lay off. Our methods for moving inventory are actually working. But ultimately, Tavares, who is now at war with the UAW, as we've been covering, now the Stellantis dealer network, and really the market. I think he's a man that's probably not getting a lot of quality sleep at night right now. And these nobody wants your vehicles reports are like, just, I don't know, they just really starkly underscore that problem. Probably just a little bit of salt in the wound for them. But yeah, I mean, these are real problems for Stellantis. This is not just an anecdotal report about a couple bad months. The dealer network is saying that, I mean, they're basically crying foul and saying, you are mismanaging this company. The inventory problem is a brand problem that is causing us a lot of issues. So it's been interesting to follow.
Jeff, Stellantis has a lot of brand problems. He's talked about cutting them. I was kind of surprised. I thought Rhea had talked about the Dodge Hornet possibly going away as one of those brands. But I'm sure that with maybe a little bit of melatonin and some regular exercise, maybe Tavares could sleep a little better.
Well, maybe. I think what's interesting here is when you look at, there's a couple of these vehicles, first of all, a Camry, just one of the most basic stripped down options out there. Not what you think of as a real fancy, glamorous type of vehicle. It's not an EV, that type of thing. So it's always interesting to see that one up there at the top. And I think that just stems from the fact that it's got such a reputation for reliability, performance. It's going to last. This is plug and play for 250,000 miles.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that power emanates throughout the consumer marketplace, and they know exactly what to expect. Then you look at these other two, the Toyota, the Highlander and the RAV4, and then you compare that to the Hornet and the Grand Wagoneer. They're competitors. They're in that same vehicle type. And when you look at the RAV4 especially, which is just through the roof, there's so many of those on the roads right now, and you compare that with the Dodge Hornet, they're very comparable in terms of size, performance, options, all of those things. The RAV4 tends to be a little bit less expensive. But again, it's got that Toyota sticker on it, so people believe in the reliability of it. And I think that's where I was not aware of that letter from the dealers, but it makes a lot of sense because I think Stellantis has struggled mightily in marketing and understanding the U.S. marketplace. I think that's where Dodge and especially Jeep should be a real flagship for them, really leading the way, even more than in what it does now.
Agreed.
But I do think they have undersold that particular line, and I think that reinforces the fact that even though it sounds super basic, Stellantis doesn't have an engineering problem. They have a sales problem. I don't think they know how to sell outside of that Fiat type of product line. I think they really struggle with it. So when you see these two types of vehicles, the Grand Wagoneer as well, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
But the Toyota Highlander can get up there too. When you start putting the bells and whistles on that one, it can definitely be up there. So I think this does sort of illustrate a very interesting dichotomy between these very competitive brand lines and how two different companies have gone about in marketing them, especially here in the U.S.
Yeah. I mean, I just lived this when we were looking at a Sienna and you try to negotiate it all and the dealer's just like, nah. Like you're on a list. I'll just call the next person. He's like, you can pick anything else. that's out there, and maybe we could talk. But we have people waiting in line for this. But I like lists like this that could help consumers make more empowered decisions. Because when you look, maybe not the Wagoneer or the Hornet, but when you look at some of the other makes and models that are on that top 10 or the bottom 10, I guess, you could really go take that to a dealer and just be like, hey, listen, let's try to make a deal and get yourself a better deal for a new car. I don't know. So I like when these lists come out and give you a little bit more perspective. But man, going down to IMTS and driving past that Belvedere plant, it's kind of sad. I wanted to stop and, take some photos because we cover it so often. It's just like, just leave it be, just hopefully we see a lot more people parked out front of that a little bit soon here. All right. Before we move on to, in case you missed it, the stories that weren't as popular on our websites like Industrial Equipment News or IEN.com or manufacturing.net, we have another word from our sponsor. This week's episode is brought to you by QAD Red Zone. A big part of maintaining a functional and efficient manufacturing environment is to understand what it takes to make a team work. And for a business like Nuco, who have been proudly making high-quality adhesives in North America since 1988, empowering and motivating its employees is a critical objective. This is why Nuco set out to find solutions to bring technology to its workforce in order to aid the team in goals around productivity and compliance, meanwhile boosting morale. In this exclusive webinar, there's a great group of leaders discussing how this was able to come together, both from Nuco and also from QAD Red Zone, the tech partner whose solutions helped Nuco achieve the benefits. So there's a link to download this on demand in the live chat. You can also check it out in the body copy underneath the episode. Download it now so you can watch it on demand. Anna, it is crazy how just reading a date like 1988 can make you feel old. Just since 1988, and I immediately get shorter, kind of crunch a little bit. I don't know, a cane appears from the ground that I can grab.
Yep.
All right, in case you missed it, stories maybe not as popular, but could make a big impact on the industry going forward. What do you have for this week, Anna?
I selected a story about the finalists for the Toy Hall of Fame.
Always a hot,
That's an
debated
awesome
topic.
That's why I chose it, because I thought last year our discussion became a pretty hearty debate. So the National Toy Hall of Fame has unveiled its annual list of finalists. They're going to vote in November. They've been doing this since 1998 and have recognized more than 80 toys for inspiring creative play across generations. Some of these are humble playthings like the stick, the cardboard box, and some that are a little bit more mainstream, Barbies, Dungeons and Dragons. So last year's inductees were baseball cards, Cabbage Patch Kids, Fisher-Price Corn Popper, always a favorite, and Nerf foam toys. So this year's nominees include the Trampoline, the best-selling Choose Your Own Adventure game book, Hess Toy Trucks, remote-controlled vehicles, the Stick Horse, as well as games like Apples to Apples, Phase 10 Sequence, and the Pokemon trading card game, along with two perennial nominees, My Little Pony and Transformers action figures, both of which debuted in the 80s. Perhaps the most contentious, also nominated, is the balloon. And I don't know. Sometimes I get into the weeds with this, and I'm not sure how I feel about like the balloon or the stick. I mean, I get it that like all the world's a toy, and when you're a kid, but like, okay, I mean, we don't need to nominate like the potion that my kids are making out of leaves.
Oh, slime.
Yeah, whatever in the yard. Like, we gonna vote on that one? Yeah.
That's going to be nominated next year. Childhood Imagination, the greatest toy available.
The brain.
Yeah, the brain. This Toy Hall of Fame lost all credibility with me last year when they failed to recognize the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys and didn't let them in. So all of this is garbage.
Well, I mean, you can be re-nominated.
I don't see them on the list this year. Were they just giving them a pause?
I guess so.
You're going to let the Transformer in first, which, I mean, if that doesn't get in this year, watch out. Like, but I will say all of these are kind of bangers, though. Like, I mean, you can say what you want about a balloon, but it is incredible how much joy a simple balloon can bring a kid. And also how much terrible, terrible agony one balloon for 2 kids can bring an entire family.
I know, a lot of head collisions and then emotional breakdown when the balloon inevitably pops because everyone gets so attached to the balloon.
Where do you stand on games getting into this?
I don't. I mean, games, yes, I'm okay with that. What the books though? I'm not like Choose Your Own Adventure. I think was on there last year too, and I was also against that. That's not a game.
You know what? The people chose their adventure, and that adventure was it not getting into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
it's been voted out.
All right.
I know that you could say the same thing about the Turtles, but that's ridiculous.
I never played with turtles.
You never played with turtles? I'll bring some in 10 minutes. They'll be sitting on the table out in front of our desks, and in 10 minutes, you will have picked them up and played with them.
Nah.
Yep.
Nope.
Jeff, where do you stand on what should make it, what shouldn't make it? And could we also recognize the everlasting joy of the stick horse?
Well, first of all, I will debate Anna on the Choose Your Own Adventure books because I was an advocate for that one last year.
Nothing against them on merit.
That's for the Book Hall of Fame.
Book Hall of Fame, not Toy Hall of Fame.
I'm going to disagree. I think it should be in there.
All right. You want? I vote for the dictionary.
The Scrabble dictionary.
Played with the dictionary.
People in timeout.
Maybe I had a really nerdy family, but like my sister and I would read these to each other, and the other one would pick the what choice to make.
Oh yeah, no, we
kind of entertained each other there.
We do enjoy them for literary fun, not toy fun. Right. I mean, but you can't say more than Transformers, My Little Pony, the Hess trucks.
I mean, okay.
Yeah.
But I will say it is a toy worthy of being nominated.
It's worthy of the nomination.
You can make a game out of Choose Your Adventure books.
Yeah.
So anyway, am I the only one who called them hobby horses? The horse on a stick?
No, I think that's what they're called. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, really?
That's what we
haven't heard
them.
that.
Man, my brother and I played with those things till like the stuffing was coming out of the horse.
So, those are fun.
Which is kind of disturbing to say out loud, but as kids, those were awesome. So that's definitely where my vote would go towards a hobby horse.
I would say they stand out because, or they, the interest remains because when my brother, one of my younger brothers was married, we stayed at a Wild West themed hotel that happened to sell a barrel full of these horses on a stick. And you know what? Just because I felt like it, I bought all of them and gave them to everybody. And fun was had by all and still does. I mean, producer Alex had one in his car until recently, until the car died. I wish that, you know what? It would have been the true test if it made it to the new car. But I got to say no to sequence on this one. I will argue for phase 10 and apples to apples, but that's the only one that I'm like, this one, like sequence can't get it, right?
I'm not familiar with that one. What is that?
Is it the word game? Is sequence a word game or is it a number game?
I thought it was those like little pellets that you like try to get. I don't know. None of us know what sequence
this is.
So therefore it should not be.
They're short. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to mine in case you missed it. This week I chose a story about Crocs because that's what the world needs, more of those. New Crocs made from 25% old Crocs. Crocs today announced the Keep It Going Classic Croc, or the Classic Clog, a new shoe made from 25% post-consumer recycled content sourced from old Crocs. The old shoes were collected through the brand's Old Crocs New Life consumer take-back program. As part of the initiative, customers returned old Crocs via a mail-back kit or a retail drop-off for the company to repurpose. In exchange, customers got a 10% discount on a future purchase. The product launch comes 2 weeks after Croc announced it achieved 25% biocircular content across its Cross-Lite portfolio, which includes the company's Classic Clog and most of the brand's shoes. According to the company, Cross-Lite accounts for more than 80% of Crocs' total footwear material use. The company sources repurposed bio-based waste from other industries to make this material. And the brand's priority is to keep shoes on feet for as long as possible. So when they receive Crocs that are more gently used, they're donated to Souls for Souls, an international nonprofit organization. But the Crocs that aren't usable are processed, sorted, and deconstructed into this post-consumer recycled material. I chose this story because I thought it was a really good example. We see a lot of brands experimenting, trying to figure out how ESG goals can turn into new materials, usable materials, that you don't lose anything in terms of performance. You don't want to hurt your brand integrity because, we talk about Lego, but we saw them do a couple of different initiatives where, it just didn't pass the quality test. And so they've kind of had to backtrack. I thought this was a cool story about, a possible abomination of footwear, but still an interesting way that a company is trying to meet its ESG goals by chopping up its old shoes. Anna, what'd you think of the story?
Very cool. My kids are huge fans of Crocs, and I found that the quality of Crocs is generally quite good, so they can wear them for as long as they fit and they don't break.
Yeah,
which is really nice because kids' shoes, you never know what you're going to get.
No, that is one thing. They are very durable.
They're very durable. But I do always wonder how much greenwashing. I know they said that they have this Souls for Souls thing. Mm-hmm. But when our Crocs are past their size, fit, or whatever for our family, there has never been a time where I have not posted that anybody want these Crocs, and another mom has not taken them.
Yeah.
Because kids' feet grow fast, and so if you can reuse a pair and not have to buy another one.
Yeah.
For Crocs, getting people to buy more Crocs is really, I think, their number one goal.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's how they continue as a company.
Yeah. So it's probably great for them for you to not do that, for you to not share those, and you'd send them back to them so they can.
They'll make sure they find a good home if they're still reusable.
Whatever that means. So, it's cool that they're doing this. I hope that they're being straightforward about actually putting those shoes out into market.
That heavy skepticism.
Well, I think you have.
Right.
I think you have to be.
Yeah.
Because
no, greenwashing has ruined it for everybody.
It has, and when there's a heavy incentive for them to get those lightly used shoes out of the market and back in their own hands, so people have to buy their own.
Yeah.
Then you kind of wonder, I don't know. That's just the way I see it, but I'm not trying to be a huge wet blanket about this recycled shoe story. So
I would say that there's been a lot more of that. We've seen that Gen Zers in particular are much more focused on buying used clothing and not just from, the reason previous generations were to try to make it retro chic, just in terms of sustainability. They're doing that. And I think that there have been more forums and efforts for people to, I encourage anyone in any community they're in to check out the free page, the free giveaway page on Facebook, because if nothing else on Facebook is worth your time, that is just in terms of trying to rehome stuff that you've grown out of. My house has yet to grow out of a pair of shoes. Unless
before
by
accident, they get trashed.
Yeah, before they're riddled with holes. Literally yesterday, Des was like, I think I need new shoes, and pulled the top of the shoe down to halfway past his foot. And I'm like, yeah, I think it's time. I think it is time. But so look for those resources so that way you can find a way to, sometimes stuff that you think is garbage or past its usability in your home, a lot of other people have a use for it. Jeff, your thoughts on Crocs?
Definitely your son. If he's wearing shoes that he can fold in half like that.
Yeah.
That's your boy.
Oh, yeah. Well, they don't tell you until they hurt themselves or just kind of it's funny. Just look, my shoe talks.
No, I think with all of this stuff, it kind of falls in the same category for me, which it's a start. It's better than a landfill. I would agree that the better option is to find somebody else to continue using them until they disintegrate, can't be used anymore. But this is a start. And if it starts with 25%, then we go from there, and it can only get better, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a good part of the story was that Crocs set really aggressive ESG goals. The company previously wanted to be net zero by 2030, but last year's ESG report said that initiative just was neither fast nor vast enough. And a lot of it is because they acquired that Hey brand, or the Hey Dude brand. It's an Italian brand, which actually raised its greenhouse gas emissions baseline. Crocs acquired the brand in 2021 for $2 billion in cash, $450 million in stock. But when you have these ESG goals, you just try to do your best that you can. It's a moving target.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it doesn't work out as planned, and you got to push it back to 2040, which is their new goal, you know? Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
So I picked an article, Railroads and regulations must address the dangers of long trains. So I've got a little bit more serious topic, I guess, than you guys. As freight trains have grown longer, the U.S. has seen an increase in the number of the type of derailments caused by forces of rail cars pushing and pulling against each other. That's from the National Academies of Sciences. So basically what this article is about is it looks at how, in order to cut costs and deliver more goods and be more profitable, all the major railroads have basically expanded the length of these trains. They're up more than 25% since 2008.
Whoa.
We're now looking at trains that can be over 2.5 miles long. Okay, to the point now where they've got radios that you can't even talk to the person at the front of the train and the person at the back of the train.
Whoa.
So obviously this is raising a number of safety concerns. When we look at the recent Norfolk Southern accident that caused all those terrible things in Ohio, that was a train that was 1 3/4 miles long. Okay, so we understand why the trains have gotten longer in terms of saving costs and getting more goods to their final destination. But what is the real price we're paying here in terms of safety? We've seen more derailments go up. We see more. It's a combination. The stuff that is now being delivered by rail, we've got a lot of chemicals out there, which is obviously a cause for concern with these length of trains, because you can have one part of the train at the half-mile marker going up a hill, going down a hill, while the stuff in the back is coming up, and that creates all this push and pull that creates huge safety concerns. Mm-hmm. So that's what they're looking to address and trying to work with the railroad companies to say, hey, look, we're not trying to bankrupt you, but we got to be safer here. My thoughts immediately go to a lot of the agricultural products that are also hauled on trains, whether it's seed, wheat, flour, sugar, all of that kind of stuff, which we all need. And we've seen what happens when there's shortages in the supply chain for those types of commodity type goods that rely on rail. If we start limiting, how is this going to play out, I guess, essentially is where I'm going here. If we start having to shorten up the length of these trains for safety reasons, which makes sense in a lot of cases, what is that going to do to the supply chain, to deliverability, and then to prices? Mm-hmm. Also, the union is going to come into play here. Remember, we had the big union rail strike last year and how that really clogged everything up. So now that they've got a lot of regulators on their side saying, you need more people on these trains if they're going to be this long, that eats in the cost. We need more people. We got to pay them better. We got to make sure they have benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of different variables that could come in play here with something real simple as shortening up the length of these trains. So I think it's a really interesting one. And we talk about stuff that could have an impact down the line. Another bad pun. This is one. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
What I can't understand is how we just can't get rail right in this country. Yeah. You know, we ran the story, Anna, what was it, a few months ago, where that Norfolk Southern crash, the chemicals from it have been found in 37 states, and that's because they didn't test the other 17 or 13? I'm great at math. But I don't know, anytime we run these stories, whether it's them pushing back about having at least 2 people on these trains, the safety in terms of having them automated, I am surprised with how much push and pull there is from a regulatory and corporate standpoint in just trying to make them generally safer. That's what's wild to me.
Yeah. Yeah. When you said 2.5 miles, I had to look at that and be like, did I mishear that? That's outrageous. I just can't even believe that that's something that we can defend. The fact that people's radios may not work from the beginning to the end. And it says in here too that the software systems and the technology contained therein is not perfect. So that's the other challenge for these people working on the trains, that potentially they are in an unsafe situation. And of course they're concerned. I mean, to see it sort of casually just from 2008 turn into this is really kind of scary.
Well, I think it goes back to, too, other than railway crossings, when is the last time you heard anybody champion investments in railway infrastructure? You know, I mean, we look at the crossings because it's a safety thing for kids, bikes, cars, everything. But when we look at just who wants to invest in better rail for rail, for goods and for a non-passenger railway.
Yeah.
It's just not sexy. It just doesn't get a lot of attention. And as a result, nobody wants to invest in anything. The railroads have kind of adapted a similar personality is kind of what it feels like to me. What's the most cost-effective way we can get it there? And safety at times takes a bad seat.
We're so good at geofencing these days. Is what we need to do is figure out how to do targeted advertising for people stuck behind these trains. So when they're stuck behind the train and on their device, you can just hit them with an ad that's like, isn't rail antiquated in this country? You know, and just because that's like the one time everyone's got enough time to sit and think, because there's one intersection in particular in Madison where I know you get stuck behind that train. And in the moment, if you asked me how long it was, I would guess at least 2.5 miles because it goes forever. And then it stops because someone's trying to jump on it or jump off of it. And then their person comes with a flashlight trying to chase them.
But we also have to develop an appreciation for what these roads do.
Yeah,
and the impact
agreed.
they have in our daily life. Not just talking about being antiquated, but also just appreciating what it's about and making sure it's safe.
True, because a lot of everything that is involved with the rail industry is sort of out of sight, out of mind for everybody.
Right, absolutely.
All right, well, let's move on to our final thoughts this week before we get out of here. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
First of all, back up a second. Are you really seeing a lot of people jumping on and off trains? Like,
I've seen
is it somebody with like the
at least
stick
5
with
times.
the handkerchief on the end?
They
and,
do
like,
not have
can of beans in there.
They are sometimes carrying beans, but there is one intersection in particular where there is like a homeless encampment right by the rail crossing, and people are jumping on and off there, and then they will stop the train, and then you will see the people with flashlights running back and forth, and typically at some point, the person who has jumped off will run past your car.
I have never seen this.
But this is an East Side thing, so you might not be at the specific stop. Mm-hmm. But it's happened more than one.
Kind of want to find it now.
Yeah,
it is. Well, the first time it happened, I'm just like, well, what's that person running from? And then you see the people with the flashlights, you're like, oh, those guys. Real problem.
Jeff and I are soft. We live on the west side.
Yeah. I moved. No, I'm not seeing that problem too much in my new community. Anna, do you have a final thought this week?
Yeah. So my daughter's school bus has an app this year. So you can check the status of the bus. There's like a little map on there, and you can actually track the bus as it goes. And the third day of school, so I downloaded the app, and I'm really excited to use it because the bus time is very early. So if the bus is running late, I would rather not like run out the door. It's not going to be there. The third day of school, I don't know if they forgot to turn on the tracking or whatever, but all the way up until bus time, the bus said it was still at the depot.
That's not good.
So we just went out there anyway, and then the bus was on time. But what that did was instill a fear in me of accuracy of whether or not this app works.
Yeah.
And not to get too serious about it, but it made me think about why people don't use technology.
Yeah.
Because I don't use the app now because of that one incident, because I don't know if I can trust the data that's coming through.
Yeah. All it's got to do is not work once.
All it's got to do is not work once. And, you know, you hear about this in manufacturing a lot. Somebody has a bad experience with something, and then they come up with their own workarounds. It truly is reality in so many cases, and it is for me now because I'm like, well, we'll just go to the bus, and if it's late, it's late. But the last thing you want to do is miss it, and the stakes are too high, so you're not going to rely on that app. And so it definitely hit home for me when that happened. Like, oh, I think this happens to people a lot.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I have downloaded apps. They haven't worked as I expected. And then within the same 2-hour window, just completely uninstalled it. It's like, it's not going to work. My final thought this week was that IMTS was fantastic. We have ongoing IMTS coverage, particularly on IN.com and manufacturing.net. So make sure to check that out. We'll have more IMTS coverage, both in video and maybe even podcast form. We're trying to kick that around. But I just want to say my initial thoughts from the show were it was fantastic. The first day had everybody very skeptical because, you know, typically people come in on Sunday, Saturday, they get ready and they hit the ground running on Monday. Seems like a lot of people were coming in on Monday, which was great for us because it's great for the media. So a lot of people are available, ready to talk. Everyone's kind of just like, hey, so like you said 80,000 people, huh? Where are they? But But man, Tuesday, they were all there and it was insane. And that is just a lot of manufacturing happening and, a very relatively small footprint. It's still, it's like the 10th time I've gone. And still, I'm like, you know what? I should be able to make east to west in about 15 minutes. Yeah. But then you can make it Monday, but you can't make it Tuesday because there's a sea of humanity you've got to navigate. And one thing that was pretty cool was I missed him because we're not typically at the booth, right? We're going booth to booth, interviewing different companies, seeing what new products they have coming out. But loyal listener Doug stopped by the IEN booth, and it was really cool. He was rocking a Today in Manufacturing podcast hat.
Yes,
and
Doug.
He dropped off a gift for us. So I wanted to pull it out, and I'm going to forewarn you. I apologize. These have been in transit. So I traveled with this bag of chips, but he dropped off a bag of chips for us. These are from Doug, groovy mesquite smoked bacon flavored chips. Mike sells. They're delicious.
So you opened them in the car?
I did not open them in the car.
Oh, it's just flat. Okay.
No, it's just flat from trust me.
They were open too.
When I was stuck for like 3 hours in Illinois traffic, I'm like, I know there are chips, but you can't open them because you plan on using them in the podcast.
You could have opened
them.
No,
because just think of how differently this exact moment would have been. We're just like, oh, you couldn't save them all for all of us? You just couldn't help yourself.
1,000%.
But no, so I wanted to thank Doug for stopping by. It's really cool when people, say hi from the podcast and we can kind of catch up. And I'm sorry I missed him, but that is a smell. You going to try these? You're not going to try them? It's just bacon flavor.
Doug, nothing. I'm a vegetarian. Nothing against you. Thank you, though. That was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, Jeff took a step back.
I don't want to right in the microphone.
Oh yeah, no.
I thought you were like floored by something.
No,
these are delicious.
They are very delicious.
Wow.
I'm glad I didn't open them in the car because they would be gone.
Oh yeah.
But so
thanks, Doug.
Doug, thank you very much for stopping by, man,
awesome.
And thanks for the chips.
And thanks for wearing the hat.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It was a reminder of when we're at the booth. We have magazines and a sign that says who we are. I'm like, we really could have brought more podcast stuff here.
We could have.
Just had a little bit more of a podcast present. But it was really cool. So thanks again. Jeff, your final thought this week.
Well, similar to Anna was talking about technology, maybe over-reliance or whatever. It was an interesting weekend. Last weekend I was fishing, so I wasn't here. But a guy I went fishing with was talking about getting a new trolling motor. You know what I'm talking about? Goes in front of the boat.
Yeah.
And they can tie the trolling motor into the fish finder. So it's got a GPS, so when you mark fish on the fish finder, the trolling motor will take you there.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm kind of thinking in a way that's cool because you want to catch fish, but it's also one of the things I personally try to get away from. One of the things I enjoy when I'm out there, half the time the cell phone doesn't work, which is great, all that type of stuff. So it was just interesting, and that was sort of juxtaposed against learning how to play cribbage, which is the most non-technical activity you can probably do.
Yep.
I mean, you've got pegs and a board that you have points on and you're playing cards. I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to see getting the same sort of relaxing, appreciating up north effect from two very, very different sort of dynamics.
Yeah.
But it was a great weekend. It was fun thinking about both.
It's weird when technology comes into play with that. And at some point it almost feels like cheating. Where it's somebody has geotagged where the fish are and it can take you straight there. And then you have the camera that tells you exactly what depth they're at.
Those fish finders are scary.
Yeah.
How good they can be. And he's got a little bit of an older one, so it's a nice compromise where we are right now. But thinking about where it could go, it's like, I don't know if I want to go there or not. You know? I don't know.
No, I completely agree. But it sounds like a really relaxing time. And again, thanks to Nolan and Andy for filling in for us. Yes. Really do appreciate it.
Even though I don't like to give Nolan too much credit.
No, I was going to leave it there.
I mean, he did fine.
Well, and it seemed, based on your guys' reactions, it seemed like while I was trying to compliment their job they did last week, that maybe it didn't come off that way when I started. So that's why I kind of wanted to just circle back.
Circle back to that. Okay.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Message received.
Well, before
keep it together, Anna.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it together every week.
we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And subscribe to us on IEN Magazine so you can join John, who's here today, Doug, Alex, someone named Moondust, all in the live chat. And so we can mix it up during the live episode. For Jeff Franke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.